So I don't know. I think it's this computer. I have to probably buy another computer because I don't see the option to do the live stream to social media live. So I apologize. But if you all would like to start, we have some more participants. Let me add them to the. Hi, Karla. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Good.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So I was trying to do Facebook Live, but I don't see the caption here. So,
You know, I mean, you could just save the recording and upload it afterwards.
Yeah, but I apologize. My whole purpose was to bring more people into the conversation, but I'll get right. I apologize. I'll get it right. So let me just find my introduction real quick. I apologize for time. If my grandson wasn't here, I would have been all set. So please bear with me. Right, I've been working on this for a minute.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you.
Fine. Yeah, it's totally fine.
Yeah, but we on people's time, and I just don't really. You know what? I think I could do this without the. I could do it without the introduction. So, hi everybody who's joining us today. I'm Alicia Dorsey, PA Road Report Watch, and I wanted to start having conversations to build compassion for humanity because I've been out protesting to defund the police and advocating for restorative justice, and people don't understand what restorative justice is. But there's also a lot of other concerns going on around the uprising. So I reached out to my friend Michelle. I reached out to my friend Michelle Myers and asked her if she would join me in having conversations to build compassion and to help us hear the voices of our Asian community. So Michelle and her powerful self, she's a great person, wonderful spirit. You really have to meet her. She's an award-winning poet, and she really brings it. Like, she's head on. She's like, she doesn't play with it. So with no further ado, I'd like to give it to Michelle to have a conversation on building compassion for humanity.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this Compassion for Humanity, these conversations. I'm just really honored to be able to work with you on this project, and I know that you have a lot of other things that you want to do working with the community. I also want to say I've known Alicia for a very long time now. I think at least 10 years, right, Alicia? Yeah. And she actually used to come to Family Style when we used to have the Family Style open mics at Asian Arts Initiative, and you know, you did a lot of photography and film at Community College of Philadelphia, right, Alicia? Yeah, and so I was saying to Alicia the other day, because she was asking, you know, for our headshots and stuff, and I sent her one, and I was like, this is one that you took of me at the Asian Arts Initiative. So I have lots of photos that Alicia's taken of me performing and stuff. So I'm just really, you know, happy that she invited me and just really honored to be here. And then, you know, for all of my sisters who are part of this conversation, you know, when Alicia first started to you know, discuss her vision for these conversations, I immediately thought about having, you know, my sisters be a part of this, because I just kept thinking about, you know, if we were going to have a kind of healing circle, and I'm sorry, I'm going to start getting emotional already. We were going to start having, you know, conversations about this. I would love for us to start like with, you know, the way that we already, you know, hold space with each other, you know, and I always see that our conversations are a healing circle, you know, so first, before I get into that, I guess I'll just go around and just really quickly introduce Sovannary. So Sovannary, if you could just, you know, wave to everybody, to Kao, and then Merlin. And then I guess joining us right now is Karla, right? We just want to welcome Karla. I just make sure I say hello and welcome. But Sovannary, Kao, and Merlin and I used to work together about 15 years ago at CMAC. which is CMAC stands for Southeast Asian Mutual Assistance Association Coalition, and it's a community-based organization, which is located in South Philly now. The CMAC basically works, I mean, even though in the name of the organization, it says that the focus is on the Southeast Asian community in Philadelphia, really CMAC works with lots of different refugee communities all over the city of Philadelphia. And, you know, we worked with refugee communities through healthcare, issues surrounding healthcare, education, youth programming, and also social justice and advocacy issues. And so that's how we all met and became friends. And we've been having these kinds of meetings and conversations for a very, very long time. Our one dear friend who's not in this circle, who it all kind of originated, I think we can say these conversations originated at her house, was Lisa. Yeah. Lisa Lee, yeah, so we would get together like, you know, once a month to talk. And so anyway, I just knowing, you know, just the loving and generous spirits of, you know, my sisters, I wanted to be able to share this space with all of them. So thank you guys for being here. So I don't know if anybody wants to say anything before we get started. I just kind of want to, I've been already talking a lot here at the beginning, so I don't want to.
But can you open with a poem, please? And then, like,
yeah,
poetry is like really powerful, and art is also part of our process of healing. Is like using art to bring people into the conversation.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to start with a poem. I will just kind of first say that this is going to be my first, you know, virtual performance. It's very weird to be performing in front of my computer like this, so I don't know how it's going to go. So please, I hope you guys will be patient and, you know, and I guess be kind if I mess it up. But I actually thought that given what we're going to talk about today, that I was going to start with one of my solo poems called Notes from the Underground. And just a really quick background about this poem. I wrote this poem, I wrote the first version of this poem back in 2002 when I went to Detroit for the 20th anniversary of Vincent Chin's murder. There were all these remembrance events around Vincent Chin's murder. And if any of the folks who are listening don't know who Vincent Chin was a Chinese American man who was murdered by two white auto workers who blamed the reason for their being laid off on the Japanese auto industry. And Vincent Chin was at a bar in Detroit. It was his bachelor party. He was actually getting married the next day. And they, you know, called him some racial epithets, and he defended himself. And then they were angry that, you know, he defended himself, that he stood up to them. And so they waited for him to leave the bar later that night, and they beat him to death with a baseball bat. And they were acquitted of his murder. And so I've been performing this poem for a really long time to raise awareness about anti-Asian violence. Over the years, I've added, even though it was first written in 2002, I've added some things to it to kind of update it to current events. So I think that you'll understand that as I go through the poem. So this is Notes from the Underground. Remembering Vincent Chin, Detroit, June 2002. Remember. I've been using this word a lot lately, but I wonder if I've been using it right. I mean, how do we remember ourselves? You know, repair our dismembered selves? I hear the Reverend say our speaking is just the beginning, but I stand in this cemetery that sings Vincent Chin's Notes from the Underground, and I wonder if silence ever really ends, especially in this Detroit summer swelter where I can't breathe enough to feed the human hunger of this place. But then I dream a breeze waltzes down my body and breathes life into this dirt, singing his notes from the underground, notes that windsurf on the early summer air until it's whispered in heart chords that chime tears of remembrance. And I cried, even though I didn't know him. And I wish I had a private moment to think about the difference between quiet and silence, listening and hearing, feeling and being, seeing and knowing. But all I have is this place that's become my pilgrimage and these people who have become my people. The family of Vincent Chin, my people. The family of Joseph Aledo, my people. These poets, musicians, artists, singers, my people, these Christians, these Muslims, these Jews, my people. And I wonder, when did we cease to be a people? At what point does conscience collapse so that we fail to remember ourselves before we beat a Chinese American man to death with a baseball bat? Before we squeeze the trigger 41 times to kill an African American man who's holding up his wallet? Before we drag Black men to their deaths down Texas roads? Before we bomb Afghanistan? Before we strap bombs so our bodies become suicide bombers? Before we rape women in war? Before we abandon war babies? Before we invade Iraq? Before we shoot a 19-year-old Hmong youth 8 times in the back? Before we beat and burn and hang and leave for dead gay men on Wyoming fences? Before we choke an African-American man with our knee on his neck? Before we stab to death a Muslim woman just because she's wearing a hijab? Before we dismember ourselves? Because this list could go on and on and on to sever us with language that represents action without conscience. And in this moment, every part of me wants so badly to sing in retaliation and to dismember the moment I remember of being on bended knee, returning notes I received from the underground. A clicking noise warns that a beheading is coming. His snapshots quickly hunt me down and freeze me with questions just as intrusive as his camera. Why are you here? What is your connection? And I am too stunned by the demand for an answer to put into words the calling in my heart. So I remember I say simply, I am an Asian American woman. It was important for me to be here. And I remember I spilled my tears onto red and yellow carnations that danced with baby's breath under the June Detroit sun. Thank you.
Wow. That was so powerful. Ms. Vincent Chen, what's his name?
Wow.
Vincent Chin, yes, that was the name.
That was beautiful, and that was very powerful.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so, I mean, that poem, go ahead. I'm sorry, was someone else going to say something?
No, it's speechless. I was out of myself. I forgot what am I, and it's just carry on. It's really powerful.
I mean, I just want to say something really quickly, and then I kind of want to turn it over. And maybe, you know, to kind of guide the conversation, I'll kind of bring something up. But I think for me, you know, besides, as I mentioned before I started to perform the poem, that I perform this piece oftentimes to raise awareness about anti-Asian violence. But I think that the other point that I wanted to make in this poem was that, you know, regardless of how we identify on the basis of race or gender or sexual orientation or religious beliefs or whatever, right? Ethnicity, culture, all of that, it doesn't matter. We should all care about each other and have a profound sense of responsibility for each other, because human life is sacred. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what's so, you know, really sorrowful for me, especially over the last few months, especially with, you know, the murder of George Floyd, but the murder of so many, you know, innocent people that we've been seeing happening over and over again, is just how we, you know, we as human beings don't treat each other, you know, in a sacred way. You know, we should treat each other's lives, you know, whatever we consider sacred, whether it's, you know, our place of worship, if we go to church, or if it's being in a space of prayer, or if it's our families or our children, we should treat everyone in that way, you know. And so you know, since there is this failure, has been this failure, this breakdown of being able to recognize the sacredness of human life, I think that's kind of what I was trying to express in that poem, that it doesn't matter, you know, we have as human beings, we have a responsibility to each other, you know.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if anyone want to comment on that, or if you want me to like start with some questions, or Alicia, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I really appreciate that poem. It really brought it home how there's a silent lit in these communities but we're all going through the same struggles. And we don't have any conversations, and we don't know that we're all going through the same struggles or how to move forward. So I really appreciate it, and hope that it helps bring us together. I don't know if y'all want to conversate about the poem or where your next up was, but I'm here to listen.
So I'm Karla. I was going to say what I appreciate about the poem that I feel like we miss in normal conversation is that we always talk about these issues isolated in the different ethnic groups, right? And it too often we're not seeing the big picture. And I think the reason it allows the problem to be perpetuated over and over and over again is that, and this is not taken away from the idea of Black Lives Matter, but you have, when we start talking about Black lives, right? A lot of Black people don't know that Asian people are experiencing this, and particularly Southeast Asians, when you're not the good Asians, right? You're not, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese are sort of the more acceptable in the United States of America. And while they're suffering as Asians, you have African Americans who don't realize that there's a whole different experience if you're Cambodian. There's a whole different experience if you're Filipino. It's a whole different experience if you're from Thailand, right? You're going to get a different experience. So people don't realize that there's this struggle there. And then, you know, like I posted something about Native people saying that they wanted to be a part of the conversation of unrest. And somebody posted, no, like we need to make it just ours. And I'm like, they suffered genocide on this nation. You can't let it just be a us conversation, right? Because it's not an us conversation, right? So then you have that, and then you have the Caribbean, the struggle of just what they're dealing with, but what we're doing is we're doing it in all these isolated spaces. So the beauty of the poem is, while you start off with Vincent, by bringing all of these stories, Afghanistan, you know, like I used to live in Japan, and which gave me a whole new perspective on the United States of America, right? Like it just changed my life. But I know this is being recorded and I'll probably get in trouble for this later, but as I was getting to know more people from around the world and people were explaining stuff to me, and I became really good friends with this woman she was a refugee from Kenya that moved to South Africa, and I met some people in the Middle East. And one day I was sitting there and I was like, I think I actually understand suicide bombers now. Like, so when you mentioned that, it's not something that I would do, but I understand getting to the point where you feel like your life is all, like it can be destroyed anyway. There's bombs coming all the time. No one values you. No one's listening. No one's hearing you. The only language they speak in is in violence. So I'm going to speak in violence, right? And so I just thought it was beautiful in the poem that you brought all of those different worlds together that forces a person to talk about it differently.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to comment, or do you want me to move on to like a question?
I just wanted to just share my experience when we're talking about intersectionality, or when we talk about our connections to other people. I just think of, you know, how I was raised in Philadelphia, and the interesting and the unique, and also not so unique if we really look at our connections to other in a sincere way. My parents were refugees in Laos, from Laos, and they came after what the Americans call the Vietnam War, or what the Vietnamese call the American War, and what the Laotians call the secret wars of Laos, because Laos was used as a battleground between you know, pro-democracy forces and pro-communist forces. So we were brought into the war, and were recruited by American CIA, trained as guerrilla warfare warriors, and used their body and their land, you know, in their warfare. And so when we came over, we were sponsored by a church. And in this church, it was on St. Simon Lutheran Church, was on 9th and Luzerne in Hunting Park, and that's where I grew up. And the women and the people who raised me were not just Hmong. The women and people who raised me were African American, mothers and grandmothers. We had Puerto Ricans. We had really, at that time, a mix of cultures in that church. And I didn't see for a long time when I was young the differences, you know, maybe because I was naive or young or innocent. I didn't see because of the compassion and the love that people gave to me and my family, that they didn't have to. We didn't look like them. You know, we're not from their culture. We didn't have anything. You know, my parents literally came with us and nothing else. But these people took us to church, they took us to school, they got us dressed, they went to conferences with us, they made sure you know, our applications were complete for college. I mean, you know, the people in my church took us and brought us a long way. And it just showed me early on what it meant to be a community member, a community leader. And you didn't have to look the same, you didn't have to speak the same language, you know. And I always remember that. So I think, you know, that definitely we do have shared histories of pain and shared histories of rebellion, shared histories of organizing together, even though we're not taught that, but we also have shared histories of love, shared histories of um, harmony, shared histories of community, and we need to start leaning on that. That this is not a reaction. They always say you know, we're rioters and we're, you know, reacting to something, but we're not. We are uprising because it has been taken away from us,
Yeah.
our culture, our belief, our right to
Yeah.
live peacefully.
Yeah.
And so I want us to all remember that there are times, just like example of me growing up and now, that we live together, we live alongside each other, we help each other, and we need to start working together and making that the message of America versus what they want us, you know, to be is divided.
Yeah. And I do want to also, you know, in the same vein as what Cal is saying, and also to kind of comment on something that Karla said earlier. I think that, you know, when Alicia first approached me about these conversations, but I mean, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I always think about these things when situations come up, you know, when certain situations come up that that seem to focus mostly on one particular group of people. And I'm always concerned. So let me just back up for a second. So when Alicia asked me, invited me to be a part of these conversations, I was, you know, a little worried about getting involved, mainly because I didn't want anyone who identified as African American to feel as though like we were trying to hijack the conversation or in any kind of way. And I always also become very wary about conversations where it seems like there's some kind of oppression Olympics happening. And it's not about that, you know, it's not about an oppression Olympics. We all have pain, even though we don't see each other's pain or we don't know about each other's pain, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That pain is there. And I think that part of what, you know, makes us stronger together is if we can, you know, recognize that we each have our own stories of pain and that it should in some way bring us, you know, together rather than pulling us apart or rather than dividing us. So it's not about my pain or my trauma is more than your pain or your trauma. Your pain, your trauma is yours and it's horrible. And I'll share my pain and trauma with you as well. But hopefully we can move forward side by side, you know, and you know, not have this turn into something where it's, you know, it becomes harmful. You know what I mean? So it does make me sad sometimes when there are spaces where people say, no, it should, and I think it's appropriate in some instances where we say, you know, we really need to figure this out for ourselves. We want this particular space right now for ourselves. That's appropriate. I think that's, you know, that's necessary sometimes. But if we're, you know, really trying to build and we're trying to move forward together, there should also be opportunities for spaces where we can all talk to each other, you know. And things that are happening right now really are impacting so many different communities. Like you were mentioning the Native American community earlier. I know Karla had mentioned that. And one of the things that's not being reported in mainstream media is the impact that the pandemic, that COVID-19 is having on Native American communities. I mean, one of the largest clusters of the, COVID-19 outbreak is in the Navajo Nation, and they're not getting any attention or, just now, starting to get some support from people who are going outside of the mainstream, like governmental channels. So I think all of those things are really important to be aware of and to acknowledge. And again, like recognizing how we're all in this together,
I just have to say, absolutely, I agree with you. I think that sometimes we focus so much on the problem that we don't look at the solution, right? And so I think if you work from what we want things to actually be and step back, you start to realize you have to work with these other people and get their stories. Because if you're saying, I want equity, right? I want liberty. I want justice for all. I want equity for all. Like all means all of those other groups. So you may start here, but you're going to, and it's important to know the stories. Like it's important to like, I have the worldview that I have now because I learned these other stories. And honestly, I mean, because we're in sort of this Asian conversation, I learned from Japanese people about their atrocities against the world, right? So yeah, I was a high school, middle school and high school teacher in Japan. And what blew me away was that they were teaching their children the history of the bad that they did. And it blew my mind that in American schools, we don't learn about Native American genocide, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't learn, most Americans don't even know that there are American territories still today. So they're like, oh, we're fighting for democracy in these other countries, and don't know that we still have territories, right? And that we still have colonized places, right? So for me, it was just so eye-opening. And I went there as I'm Black, I hate America, America equals white. Like, I was 25 years old. I was like, I gotta get out of this racist country. And then even when I was there, I started to realize like I was experiencing privilege just because I was an American and because I was a Black American, right? And I was able to go some places that I couldn't before. So now it was like, wait a minute, I was told that I was hated all over the world, and I'm not hated all over the world. But at the same time, I'm also being treated better than the Peruvian woman because she's from Peru and I'm from America, right? And so I started seeing like, if we want human rights, like we gotta get all of this shit out of our head, like all this indoctrination, all of these lies, so that we can just, like, I just feel like there are things that I loved about living in Japan, like the kindness and the community mindedness. And so I was like, if we could just take that and get rid of all of the other shit, it would be such a wonderful place to live, like in the world. Like every country should have a place where you walk into a store and the first thing in your mind is like not thinking, are they thinking something bad about me? Or are they talking bad about me? But you go in and you see someone different and you're like, hey, I want to know more about you. I want to, like, let's get together. Like, I mean, I know it sounds like super hippie-ish, but I just don't understand why in 2020, we're still having the same conversations, fighting the same battles all over the world. It makes no sense. Like it just needs to stop, like once and for all. I don't want Alicia's grandchildren to still be fighting this battle when they're 41 years old. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Since we've been kind of talking about, lots of different issues, I thought that maybe we could start with, because when I spoke with Alicia, we were thinking that we would talk about how the pandemic has impacted us, and then maybe, go on to talk about the protests and about if we had time to talk about how we feel impacted by George Floyd's murder, but obviously not just George Floyd, just, this whole history of, violence and police brutality and so forth. But I think that maybe what I wanted to start with as far as like the pandemic, if anyone wanted to share some personal stories about how the pandemic has personally impacted them. And then of course, for me, the last couple of days has been how Trump has continued to insist on calling, you know, the COVID-19, calling it Kao Kue.
Yeah, I'm so sick of him.
Yeah, and there's still video of people. I mean, I think that another story that, or stories that hasn't gotten a lot of mainstream media coverage is how there has been an increase in assault and racism against Asian and Asian American people as a result of, you know, the perception of the coronavirus and COVID-19 originating in China. And you know, and so I don't know if anybody wanted to kind of talk about that or talk about their own personal experiences or views about any of that.
I thought that we've already had these conversations. So the women in this panel are not only my sisters, but they're also my colleagues out there in community organizing. So we already had some of these conversations, and I thought what some reflections that Sovannary shared, if she wants to share it with us again, about the overwhelming kind of stress of COVID and also of the violence that's happening against community, you know, of colored people. She shared about her daughters and their experiences, and I just thought it was just, you know, her wonderful self being a wonderful person. So I don't know if Sovannary just wanted to share some of the things she's been doing.
Thank you, Kao. And first of all, thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Michelle, Kao, Merlin, and Karla. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. I think what I really love about this, what strikes me is the word compassion, because I mean, I want to share a little bit about my story, but I was a third generation Cambodian or second generation Cambodian who just Chinese ancestor who moved to Cambodia. So I am like an immigrant in Cambodia, or maybe like an immigrant children were born in Cambodia. So basically, I never have any home. I don't really have a real home. So when I was in Cambodia, when I was young, I being told to go back to China because of my skin color, because of the way how I look. And not, I mean, like, you know, it just feel like even my name, because I have a Chinese name, I being picked, you know. So then, you know, I cried to my dad. I said, Daddy, you know, I don't want to go to school no more. So, and then he said, why? I said, because they're making fun of me, because they want me to go back to China, which is, there is no home over there. So, and then my dad changed my name, Sovannary, based on of that incident that he said, I can fix it for you. So, and then he changed from a Chinese name to a Cambodian name, because he fixed that problem for me. So going forward, nobody bullied me because of my name, but my face, I cannot change. So after that, I moved to America. To be honest, first of all, I want to say I'm very grateful to be here. I feel like Kao, I feel welcome to America based on all my experience. I mean, I have a bad and good, but then most of all, I think what keeps me going is gratitude toward American that give me that space to give me the temporary home to call home again. So then, since then, I maybe because become more mature, I said, okay, there is no home for me, but I can make one home. It's here. So to make a home here, to build a foundation, and to build a foundation means to grow love, and to grow love is start with my family. To not start big, but start small. And to start small, it starts from me. So then I spread that love to my children. I am still learning. Every single day, everything is still new to me, and I'm still adapting and still trying to. But then every conversation, I try to tell my kid that we can be a change agent, but it had to begin with us. There's a lot of hate out there. And everywhere, it doesn't have to be in America, everywhere, I can say that. But that hate can stop us. Why we allow it? Why don't we spread love? Because love gives us space, give us the, I guess it's like hope. For me, it's hope. And it's a light in the darkness. So pandemic is it's testing me. Like, all right, so now, not only because pandemic is like become a stigma of Asian virus, then now I have to say, if this is they call an Asian virus, I'm scared of the COVID-19 as well as everybody else equally. So my children have a hard time, especially one in the middle school. She had a hard time to adapt to this because people hear she cough in the class, they look at her and just say, oh, she must have a COVID-19. I myself, when I cough, even though I have allergy, I worry that people will think I have a COVID-19. So then instead of not only fearful with the COVID-19, myself and my family, now I have to worry that people will think of me that I can maybe transfer the disease to them. So, but to be honest, I haven't had any incident that being picked directly to me. But my daughter, she being called that, maybe looking at her in a kind of like almost like a body language to say that I think you shouldn't come here. This is I think you might have some kind of thing that make us fearful. So eventually I talked to my daughter. I said, you stand tall, continue to be strong, because you cannot stop what they say.
That's right.
But you can't stop what you think about what they say, and you continue to be you. And then just be respectful in every space. People, to be honest, all the reactions to me is based on fear, deep fears. Everybody fearful. And when they fearful, they have to try to blame other for that problem. But deep down, we have to be responsible for that fear. So for me, I come back to the conversation in my children's circle or family circle, just say, we all fearful, but we don't have to blame others. We have to find a way how to protect ourselves, so then we can protect our community, and then we can pass it down to our society to make it a better place for everyone.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And that's called resilience, right? And that's what compassion can help us build resilience in each other. So when we're going through these struggles with these stereotypes, we had that resilience to, not become them.
Yeah.
Merlin, did you want to share?
I have a problem with my internet things. If I want to share, I have to move to the room. Sorry. Let's see.
Kao, were you going to say something while we wait for Merlin?
I was just going to ask Merlin if she can share some, because Merlin is one of the biggest
to the window because it's difficult.
And she does interpreting, and she helps with the Indonesian community. She helps with undocumented families. And I know that she is still, and she was coming off of an injury this year of her leg. I know she's out there interpreting and taking people to hospital, social services. I really wanted her to speak on her experience, during this time.
Oh, thank you, Kao. That was a little bit too high for me. I mean, I'm not as like that much. I mean, yeah, but I do almost similar with Sovannary. I am a second generation in Indonesia. My parents is Chinese. So in Indonesia, I also experienced racism, where I have to change my name because I wanted to, but because I cannot go to school if I don't change my name. And the way they make it really hard for people to change name. So since I was in kindergarten until middle school, every year my dad has to pay a paper, just a regular paper, just it says that I'm in the process of changing my name. So changing my name, it takes 8 years. Every year my dad has to pay, but finally when I'm about to go to college, they said I cannot go because my name is still in Chinese name. So my dad go back to the office and getting angry, and then they give the paper. it says that I'm changing my name so I can go to college. And everybody changed the name in my family. So the really, really bad one is also happened to my dad when he passed away. You know, he was born in Chinese name and he has to change the name to be Indonesian name to in the way so he can open a store and things, businesses. And then when he passed away, the government said the birth certificate and the death certificate name is not the same. You ask us to change the name. Of course, it's not the same. So they're almost taking over all my dad's land because that it belongs to the country. It belongs to the government. So lucky we hired a lawyer. We were fighting really hard because they said the paper that it says changed name is a fake paper, and we have all the receipt that we pay for that paper. And if you change the rules, it's not our fault. You know, the death certificate, of course, the name is not the same with the birth certificate, but it's the same person that you ask him to change the name. So finally we fought and we get our land back, and we have to change it right away to be my brother's name, which is already an Indonesian name, you know, to avoid those kind of things repeat. And while I was in Indonesia in May 1998, there is a riot against Chinese. It's because the government corrupt. Since back when Indonesia under Dutch, the Chinese always becoming a black sheep. So in May 1998, people killing Chinese, raping the Chinese on the street. I was there in the middle of the street. My driver saved my life. He hid me behind the chair on the back passenger seats. And then he took me go to the train station in the night to move me go to different city. But I was there. I witnessed a riot almost like last couple of weeks ago, but that one is worse than this because my driver took me go to the attic and I can see all fire, everywhere fire, bang, car, everything blew up in the night. And it's like in the war, we cannot turn on the light. We have to use a candle on the floor so people outside cannot see the light. Before my driver took me go to the train station. So when I see in the news about the riot 2 weeks ago, it reminded me back to where I was in the middle of that thing. But it was worse than here, of course. And until now, I have the nightmare when people using motorcycle, when I drive and people, you know, especially summer, there is a lot of people with motorcycle around the street. It always giving me a light headache and nervous, like something about to attacking me. Until now, I still have. Back then, right after the riot, I was sleeping and I can just suddenly wake up because I feel like someone chasing me. So it was really bad. So when I get to America, I thought things gonna be changed and better for me. It's not like what I was thinking. It is, you know, racism is everywhere and we do have to fight for it. It was 4 times people calling me a corona in the subway when I go to work. There's a lady, a mom, the boy ran to me and, you know, I have a cute thingies on my back and the boy just coming to me. And the lady was like, stay away from corona. I was so shocked. I was saying hi to the kids and she was yelling at the kids. She was angry to the kids. You know, it's not the people's fault. If the leader give that thing, the thought to the people, of course, people are taking it. They're all Asian people has corona and they're the one who bring the corona in. But if you think it that way, you know, who's bringing the AIDS then? Who's bringing the other virus? You know, AIDS coming from America started it. You know, nobody called American people AIDS, you know, which is now it's the whole world has AIDS, you know. But yeah, it was 4 times. I was in the subway and people calling me corona. And there's a kids, high school kids, they're all playing around with me, like 4 of them in front of me and saying that you better watch out. There's corona sitting there. You know, it's like their eyes, you know, playing around to see what I'm going to react. Of course, I'm not react anything. I don't feel like I'm corona. So, you know, I don't want to involving and make it worse. So I don't say anything, but they were like make it fun. They was talking and thing, but I just like, nope, I'm not engaging with that thing. You know, I have to stop it right there. I'm not going to make myself go into the thing that is nonsense, you know. But but yeah, many people might doesn't know that Asian also get impact of racism. You know, we get it. You know, I'm not saying all black people, all white people is mean. There is white people that is nice, that is good. You know, there is black people that it's nice. You know, I have a lot of friends from African American. I have a lot of friends from white people too. But I also I experience racism from both kind of people. I mean, I'm not saying one people and the other people. Everybody, when you have hate spirit, when you have something that inside you that you're not satisfied, and you have pain inside, you wanna let it out to another people who's more weaker than you. That you know that you can just being angry to them so you can be satisfied. You know, that's why I think everybody need to step up to end the racism.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's it. What I'm gonna say. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You hit a lot of things on point, and the fact that both of y'all had to change your names in different countries,
Yes.
you showing racism all around the world,
Yes.
right? And that's really what I would like to address, is just to end that injustice all around the world. Let's just stop stereotyping people and learn to have compassion for each other. So I really appreciate you both sharing. Michelle, did you want to go somewhere else?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things that I've maybe to kind of shift our conversation a little bit and try to figure out a way to transition there. I know that when Alicia, when you and I spoke last week, one of the things that I had mentioned to you is, and this connects to perhaps some of the things that Merlin was just talking about. I mentioned to you that sometimes, you know, when people outside of the Asian American community, you know, look at us from the outside and they perceive us as not being involved or having much to say about issues of racism, or there's this perception that, you know, we're passive and so forth. I had mentioned to you that for some people in the Asian American community, the way that we perceive it is that racial dialogue in this country is most of the time split along white and black lines. And for those of us who don't identify as being either white or black, we don't feel like that we are included in the conversation, and therefore maybe we don't have a place in the conversation. And so we, you know, we kind of stay out of it. We don't know how to engage, you know. And I think that so then when we're thrust into a situation like when Trump, you know, calls it the Chinese virus or calls it Kung flu, or you have these people who are, you know, calling people of Asian descent corona, and kids at school are teasing other kids and so forth, we really don't know how to respond to it, because in so many ways we are not, you know, we haven't been equipped with talking about how racism impacts us, because in many ways the messaging that we as Asian Americans receive is that we've never really experienced racism. I mean, I've had people say that to me before, you know what I mean? Like, even as a poet going out and talking about racism and stereotypes against Asian and Asian American people, I've had people of all backgrounds, including other Asian Americans, say, what are you complaining about? Like, what are you so angry about? We don't have it so bad. We've never really experienced racism. And I say, you know, what's really sad is that just goes to show how much you don't even know our own history. You know what I mean? And so I think that there is a, you know, it's such a complex issue. You know, it's very, very, there's so many layers and there's so many things to take into consideration that we have to talk about. And I think part of that too, probably just because we're running out of time, and I kind of wanted to make sure that we touched on, you know, the protests and the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and, you know, all the people really that have been killed recently, but then over the years as a result of police brutality. And I mean, I don't want to take up too much because I want to give, you know, other people a chance to comment if they want to, but I just again to kind of refer back to something that I said to Alicia last week when she and I were talking. You know, within the Asian American community, amongst ourselves, we've been talking about the importance of addressing anti-Blackness within our communities, right? And, especially, not only, but I think especially within our older generations, which many of our immigrant parents and our grandparents came to this country for a better life. In our home countries, for many of us, we were escaping war and political turmoil, and really, bought into the idea of the American dream, that this is the country of freedom and opportunity and equality, and that no matter what, that we would be able, our parents and grandparents, no matter what, as Asians, we'd be able to come here and prosper. And so that's what a lot of our immigrant parents and grandparents did, and really didn't understand the racial dynamics, that was happening in the United States. And so there's been a lot of conversation about addressing issues of anti-Blackness. And I know for me personally, and I think that, I don't know, there are a lot of things that I'm still processing from, if I'm only going to just talk about George Floyd's murder, but recognizing this is part of a larger problem. But I know for me, when I saw that one of the police officers was Asian American, and he just stood, and didn't intervene in any kind of way, I had a lot of shame and guilt, and and then I felt even more so because I had a friend of mine who kept DMing me on social media, and he kept sending me all a bunch of stuff, and he identifies as African American, and I kept wondering like why he was sending me all these things. Like, what did he want me to say? Like, what did he want me to do? Like, I just didn't understand like what he wanted from me, and so I don't know. So but I feel the pain. I think for me, it's obviously it's very traumatic. Witnessing George Floyd's murder is very traumatic, but I think for me over the last couple of weeks, what I've worried about the most on a more personal level is his family and the impact that this is going to have on his family. And, once all of the news cameras are gone, once all the people stop interviewing them, all the attention or whatever, it's just going to be them and their pain and their sorrow and their loss. And I just worry about, what's going to be there for them, as they move forward in the future. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to bring that in. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment.
This year has been really intense. So we've gone from, I'm an educator, so I teach elementary school. So we've gone from learning about history to being history. Right. And in such a short time. So there's so many complexity. I was actually this year teaching in China. So I was overseas in China. And then when it first broke out, I came back home, but I was displaced, being in transition from jobs. And so I came to my sister's home here in Atlanta. So I'm now in Atlanta, but still in touch with folks in Philadelphia. And also I have family members in Minnesota. And so when the pandemic was hitting and we see that the administration, not my administration, not one that we voted for, did not care about people, did not care how people were contracting this terrible disease, did not provide testing, did not provide healthcare. We just saw the intense disparities of the healthcare system against people of color. And we knew this before, but this just pronounces it. I was already overwhelmed with that, trying to figure out, well, what can we do with the community? What can we do to help? And then, we were in conversations with Asian American organizing against anti-Asian violence during this pandemic. And then Ahmaud Arbery's story here in, in Georgia. And it was really intense. And I was just trying to kind of come to terms with all of this. Like, this is happening all at the same time. And then they didn't even give us, a moment to breathe. And we have George Floyd and we have Breonna Taylor. And it's not to say that these things don't happen all the time. They do, I think it's just a time in history where we can no longer just endure. We can no longer, as community members, endure the pain that's happening to all of us. And when we were, keeping, updated on all the things that are happening in Minnesota. I have family members there really close to where, these things, the rebellions were occurring. And also I'm Hmong. And so when the police officer who self-identified as Hmong was a part of this, he was a perpetrator, it really upset me. And not me personally, because, you know, I never just identify with myself as Hmong and then helping just the Hmong people. You know, I've always worked with, you know, all community members on issues, but I just was disgusted by the fact that we could be so self-oppressed, that he can believe that he was white at a moment. He was not a colored person. You know, he bought into this system that he had to protect these people and himself. And he did not even see his own morality. It was all gone. He, at that point, to me, was a monster of some sort, because his fear took over him. And I couldn't forgive him. I just couldn't, because I felt like he sold his soul, you know, and he still sold his soul, because if he really felt that he cared, he could have stepped up earlier and said, I was a part of this atrocious act, and he still hid. So I was very upset, but at that time started, you know, on social media, joining groups. One group, you know, on social media is Hmong for Black Lives, and started seeing the organizing up there in Minnesota. And, you know, was very touched by Thong Lee's family. And Thong Lee was a 19-year-old youth who was shot by the Minneapolis police, and his, you know, of course his killers got away. But as Michelle said, the family is still mourning and also still fighting. So when Thong Lee's mother, who couldn't speak English, was out there with not the rioters, but with people revolting, and she was, you know, protesting, and she talked to other community members in her native language and said that I am with you, I am grieving with you, and that we are fighting together. And she made a plea, and anti-Blackness is real. As an Asian person, anti-Blackness, because of this country especially, has pitted the Blacks as the worst there can be, this identity, you know, this lovely identity, as the worst. We take that oppression and we believe it. So anti-Blackness is real. And so anti-Blackness in the Hmong community is real. But a lot of people know what's right and wrong. And a lot of people are fighting along with Blacks and other minority groups and working together. And so when Thong Lee's mother made a plea to the Hmong community and said, you know, when my son was killed and murdered, the organizers that came to me were not Hmong people first. The organizers that came to me were Black, from the Black community. They came to me and they supported me. They stood up with me at night. They went through trial with me. And so I'm going to be there with them. And just these stories of community members coming together, showing strength, that's what I hold on to. It's upsetting. We're in a time when we're in history and we have to make this history right, for, because I'm an educator, for the people who are coming behind us. They're watching us. They're trying to figure out, why is this world such a mess? Where did we inherit this from? And, you know, it's a long, complicated history, but I want to tell them, we have to put a stop to it. We have to make a choice personally. You know, we don't have to be ashamed of our own self-oppression anymore. We should own our own self-oppression and say, how can we overcome that self-oppression to be better people?
I so love everything you just said. Is it a way that you could share the different groups that you have been able to connect with that's addressing this concern, to bring Asians concerns with the Black community, like the Minnesota group that you reached out to? Can you share that with me? Because I would like to share that with my network also, so we can also be a part of that platform. And if y'all know of any other platforms that's building these conversations where we come together, could you please share?
Definitely.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to say was sort of based off, is actually what both of you are saying, but I thought about it when Michelle was talking, is that what I find one of the problems is, and not just between Black and white people or whatever, is that we are not having conversations with each other, period. And so, and Michelle talking about like Asian people not knowing how to even be a part of the conversation, to even tell their story. I mean, I know people hate when, Black people hate when when someone says, hey, have a conversation with white people, and they're like, I don't want to do the work. They should have to do the work, you know, learn the history, blah, blah, blah. But I think that we all need to do the work. Like, I do. And I know that people don't agree with me in this, but like, the analogy I use that is a terrible analogy, but I think that gives people the visual. If I have something in my nose, right, that's hanging out my nose, the only way I know it is if you tell me. Like, I can't see it. So I need you to tell me, wipe your nose, like something's hanging at your nose. And I feel like when people say, it's not my duty to let them know that they're harming me, it's like, but if they're doing it and this has been a culture and they've been indoctrinated in this behavior, how do they know until you tell them, right? Now, do I have to do all the work for them? No. So I say this, and, you know, I grew up hearing all the time, let's go to the chink store. I grew up hearing all the time that Asians have it better because when they come here as refugees, they get money to set themselves up. And they're not starting off the way that African Americans are, right? We've been here, we built the nation, but we don't get that extra boost that immigrants get, right? But my experiences have been, because I do have a number of Asian friends, is that until people have conversation, they don't know the story. So I might not be saying it the way people want, but I think that as Asian people, you're gonna have to force the conversation with other people. Like that, like tell your story, right? And it's not taking away from their story, but like, I know this is not clean, but I feel like that the only reason my perspective changed was because when I first went to Drexel, I went to desegregation high school. I went to Girls High in Philly. And I had a lot of Asian friends, but it was because I was basically studying math. And as terrible as it is, I tended to be in a class with a whole bunch of Asians. Plus, my last name is C, so my homeroom was Chang and Chen. And so that was sort of my circle. But when I went to Drexel and we went into the lunchroom, literally everybody sat by their races, right? All the Black kids sat together, all the Asian kids, actually, and even the Asian kids were grouped based on their racial background as they could, especially at Drexel, because there were more Asians than there were Blacks. So then the Blacks and the Hispanics all hung together in their circle in the lunchroom, and the white people. And I used to try to do these like racial reconciliation conversations, and people just wouldn't come, right? And Asian people would say what you said, we're not, you know, that's not really our issue. That's really, you know, Black and white people in America, we don't know. And I'm like, but you're sitting at separate tables. Why? We take the same classes, right? So I don't know. I feel like the way to have the conversation, the way to move forward is that we have to have the conversation. Black people need to know that you had to change your name in your country because you were mistreated, right? I know Black people who don't even realize that the Native American experience was a genocide, right? That's not even a term that they use for it. I keep using those things because they're in the forefront of my head, I'm sorry. But just, I don't know, like, I would love to see more conversations where this is a very mixed group and people feel safe to say the ignorant things. The reason I am where I am now is because in high school, I would go to my white friends and say, hey, you know, all my life they told me that you guys smell like wet dogs. Why do y'all smell like wet dogs, right? That was such, you know, but Alicia knows, we say this about white people all the time, right? But I would just say it to them. And they were like, Karla, like, do Black people really think that? And I'm like, we really do. So what is it? So me and my white friend did an experiment to try to figure out when and what is causing this to happen, right? We had a conversation and it like changed our mind. So she would ask me stuff like, yeah, my family says X, Y, and Z about Black people. And I'd be like, okay, well, some cases that's true, but not really there. But like, we had the raw, dirty, disrespectful, like things, and it created healing, but nobody gets raw and dirty, right? Nobody, so that we can get it out in the air and then start realizing this stuff is ridiculous, right? And let's move forward, so.
Yeah, I agree. Those conversations are really important. I think the biggest hindrance to those kind of conversations, though, is that people sometimes don't know how to listen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so we live in this culture nowadays where, people, they want us to share, they want to say what's on their mind, but they don't necessarily want to receive the other person's story. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that's the reason why, these kind of conversations can be difficult. But if there can be a way in which there's a space that's moderated, where it's, clear what the expectations are as far as it has to be a give and take, there has to be, with a sharing of stories, that we have to be active listeners and sympathetic listeners to each other, and that the primary goal is to learn from each other about each other's experiences, with the intent and the hope that we can, build together and become more unified. I think that those, yes, are necessary conversations and are extremely important for us to be able to engage in. Yeah.
I just want to add to during this movement, I think I taking more time to self-educate it, because to be honest though, it's the Black community that makes space for the immigrant like me. So I'm feeling very grateful for that. So to at this moment, I put more time to self-educate it, to learn more. So what is the root cause of all of this suffering that continue to keep coming back to visit us? And then when every time it comes, it's not new, it's been there forever. But then how can we dissect it and understand it so then we can heal that wound? You know what I mean? So for me, I just feel like Michelle said, I think we have to become a better ally to one another. We have to lift each other up. Doesn't matter what color, eliminate the color. We all have a lot of problem that we cannot explain everything to someone else, And then so I think we just have to kind of willing to just say, be vulnerable, continue to learn, to educate it, to be more mindful, right? And to have that kind of space for one another, to hold on to each other, just say, I want to be a better ally to you. But you have to tell me clearly, what can I do to be a better ally to you? Because my 19-year-old, she frustrated, she said, I want to become a better ally to my Black community. But they said, there is no room for you. You don't understand me. So how could you try to stand up for me? So then what is our role? If you allow us to become a better ally, then we know that we can do better for you. And then so you can do better for us as well. So I think it's, like I said, I think an honest conversation and the willing to learn, I think it will help us to get to one more step closer.
I really appreciate everybody on the Zoom today. And I'm about to cry because this is like super powerful. And you've helped me to like push this conversation even more. Karla really brought some truth there, because I'm gonna tell you about 20 people confirmed to be on this Zoom, but they having issues like talking about the Asian culture when it's a Black Lives Matter conversation that's going on, and they're not trying to. They think that we're taking away from the Black Lives Matter movement by having this conversation. So I'm going to continue to have these conversations and like invite you all to the conversations, because Keon is a Philly rapper, Black Lives Matter advocate, who was supposed to be on this call, but because of that issue, I think is the reason why he's not. So he's going to have a conversation about culture with me and his followers, like his fans. And I would like to invite y'all to be part of that conversation too. So maybe that's the way to bring everybody into the conversation. Maybe I can't bring them to this conversation because they're having a hard time understanding like how we're all connected. But maybe I can invite y'all to the conversation that I have with them. And then that can help us build those bridges of conversations with, our communities and our demographics. If that's okay with everybody.
Yes, thanks, Alicia. Yes.
Thank you.
Just let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just remembering what I told my daughter when she was 3 or 4, I forgot. She was asking me because someone was calling her Chinese, something like that. And I tell her, you see the flower outside, there are so many colors, so many kind. That's why God created so many kind to make the world supposed to be more prettier, not hitting to each other, not thinking that they were better than others, you know, because when you put it in the vase, when you put the flower, when it's only one color, it doesn't look nice. It's better in so many colors on it, in the flowers arrangement. You know, it's just people sometimes doesn't looking at that way. But
Yeah.
there is so many colors in the world. There is a reason there is so many kind of things, because God create is not only just one. God create everything in many different ways, and they all equal. Supposed to be we all equal, not one thinking that they are better than the other one.
Yeah. We all have a role. We all have a
Yes.
role. We gotta learn to
Yes. Yes.
appreciate what each other brings to that table, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you,
I really want to
everyone.
thank you. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
If
Thank
you want to
you.
close it out, does anybody have any closing words y'all like to say before we close it out?
Well, actually, I was hoping that Cal would be able to close out the healing circle with a song, and then we could, you know, say good afternoon to each other. So.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Very short. Sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine.
This is very short, but I was just, you know, listening to Aretha the other day, and this song, it just, you know, her singing blows me away. So I just thought of just this little verse. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side when times get rough and friends just can't be found. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Sorry. In this time, I just want everybody to know that we are loved and we're stronger than a lot of this divisiveness. And this divisiveness is purposeful. It was systematic, you know. And so I know why people feel like it's complicated and that they would want to protect themselves because they're vulnerable at this moment. But like Sovannary says, and Merlin and Michelle and everybody on this panel has shown that we're stronger than that, especially women of color, you know, that we have brought through our communities and our children. We have raised them single-handedly after, you know, the men in our families have been murdered, have been put in jail, have been deported, taken away. And so I just want us to continue fighting and for each other, to love each other. And other people might feel threatened or uncomfortable, but I will continue my community work. My work will speak for itself, you know, and we will just have to keep going and educating and empowering along the way.
Yeah, and I also want to add that as we move forward through building compassion for humanity and having these conversations, if we're committed to dismantling systemic racism, that means that we have to reject all forms of white supremacy. And this divide and conquer kind of, tactic or these feelings that people have in terms of it's only, an issue within this particular situation or one group of people, that's a form of white supremacy, because that's what they want us to do. They want us to stay divided, you know what I mean? Because that's the way that they conquer us. And so, I was mentioning to Alicia last week, if we look at the history, if we go back to the earliest moments that Asian immigrants came to this country in the middle of the 19th century, that divide and conquer tactic has been used to keep the Asian and Black communities from being able to unify together for over 100 years, for 160 years or something like that. And we're still, susceptible to it now. So hopefully these conversations are just the beginning. Hopefully we can continue to talk and listen to each other and learn from each other. And as I think we've all been saying, to love one another, So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for holding us.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
I'll be in touch. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And bye.
Solidarity.
You too.
Bye.